Night swallowed New York in a roaring storm. Lightning tore open the sky again and again, throwing white veins of light across the city and shaking the windows of the New Yorker hotel. On the 33rd floor, inside a small room labeled 3327, an old, thin figure sat quietly by the window. His silver hair fell loosely. His cheekbones were sharp, and his eyes, deep hollow yet strangely illuminated, reflected every flash of lightning as if they belonged to the storm itself. This was Nikola Tesla, and tonight, once again, he could not sleep. Just like he hadn't slept properly for decades. Only the ticking of the wall clock and the rain beating against the glass dared to disturb the silence. Tesla sat perfectly still, hands folded on his lap, eyes fixed on the flashes outside. Each bolt of lightning made his pupils glimmer, as if his mind, relentless, unstoppable, absorbed the energy directly. Someone once asked him, "How much do you sleep each night?" Tesla had smiled gently, with a kind of smile that hides both genius and tragedy, and replied, "Not much. About 2 hours. The rest, I let my mind work." And that mind, this strange, sleepless machine, was the very reason the world remembers him as a visionary genius, and yet also as a lonely soul, trapped between brilliance and suffering, between light and darkness, between science and obsession. Tesla exhaled softly and looked down at the desk in front of him. On it lay scattered sheets of paper, half-used pencils, calculations scribbled in his delicate handwriting, and sketches of devices only he could fully understand. To anyone else, they were lines and curves, but to Tesla, each page was a portal, an entrance to a world of electric dreams, of invisible forces, of a future still unborn. Even when his body trembled with age and exhaustion, the machinery inside his mind kept running, always running. Thunder outside frightened most people, but not him. To Tesla, lightning was not a threat. It was a conversation, a language, a mirror. He closed his eyes, not to sleep, but to remember. Whenever Tesla closed his eyes, memories appeared instantly, vivid and bright, as if projected on the inside of his mind. It always brought him back to Smiljan, the small village where he was born, where he first saw bursts of light inside his mind, eruptions of brilliance that came without warning. They were not dreams. They were not hallucinations. They were images. Clear, solid, undeniable. A doctor once suggested that Tesla suffered from neurological overload. Tesla disagreed. To him, this was not an illness. It was a gift and a curse. Outside, the storm intensified. Wind howled down the narrow streets, and the city lights flickered beneath the pressure of the weather. Tesla continued to observe quietly. He wasn't just watching lightning. He was analyzing it, measuring the intensity, imagining the electrical path, calculating the resonance frequency of the thunder. To the world, he was an inventor, a scientist. To some, a madman. To others, a prophet. But tonight, sitting alone in a brutally small room with thin walls and a single lamp, he was simply a man who could not sleep. A man whose mind had grown too large, too bright, too loud for a normal human life. Tesla lifted one hand and pressed gently against his temple. A familiar ache pulsed behind his eyes. Whenever storms rolled in, the pain became sharper, as though his brain vibrated on the same frequency as the lightning. Most people feared electricity. Tesla felt at home in it. Electricity was his language. It kept him awake. It gave him visions. It shaped his life, glorious and tragic. His whisper broke the silence, low and almost fragile. I devoted my life to bringing light to the world, yet I myself have never known true darkness. He wasn't talking to anyone. Or maybe he was talking to something. Memory, destiny, or the ghosts of ideas that would never be completed. Tesla stood up and walked across the room. His steps were slow. Not because he was weak, but because he was drifting somewhere between the present and the world of his mind. Lightning lit up the room again, and in its brief white glow, his thin silhouette swayed like a shadow stuck between two universes. One step took him back to his childhood. One step pulled him towards the laboratories where he once commanded lightning like an orchestra. Another step returned him to the cramped, lonely room where history had quietly chosen to forget him. He paused, listened, breathed. Tonight, he would not sleep. But then again, he had never needed sleep in the same way other men did. Tesla sat back down and picked up a pencil. His hand trembled, but his thoughts remained sharp, cutting through the night like electricity. Every flash of lightning outside brought a new idea, an invention, a formula, a machine yet to be built. It all happened in an instant, in the private universe inside his skull, a universe brighter than the storm that raged outside. And so our story begins here, in room 3327, during a violent New York storm, with a forgotten genius, a tired heart, a restless mind, and a life that would shape the entire modern world. The door to memory opens. The light of the storm pours in, and the journey of Nikola Tesla, the man who lived in lightning, begins. The storm outside his window faded into a distant rumble, but inside Tesla's mind, a different kind of storm had already begun, one that belonged to the past. As he sat in the dim light of his New York hotel room, memories rose slowly, gently, like mist from the soil of a land far away. They carried him back to Smiljan, a small village in the mountains of what is now Croatia. Back to the crooked fences, the wooden houses, the narrow dirt paths where goats wandered freely. Back to a place simple, quiet, and unbearably beautiful in the way old European villages often are. And back to a time long before anyone knew his name. Nikola Tesla was not born into greatness. He was born into a storm. Literally. The night he entered the world, lightning ripped the sky apart. According to family stories, the midwife gasped and said it was a bad omen, that a child born in a lightning storm would bring misfortune. His mother, Juka, exhausted but fierce, looked the woman in the eye and whispered, "No, he will be a child of the light." Tesla grew up believing that sentence somehow shaped him, as if those words had carved a path before he ever took his first steps. His earliest memories were not of toys or laughter or games, but of flashes, bright, silent sparks that erupted in the air before his eyes. No one else could see them. Only him. They would burst suddenly like miniature stars, leaving shimmering trails before fading into nothing. When he tried to tell his family, they shook their heads. "Imagination," they said, "a child's mind playing tricks." But for Tesla, these bursts of light were not tricks. They were real. They were overwhelming. At times, they were terrifying. And they returned every time he heard a loud voice, or felt a strong emotion, or even simply stared into the sun for too long. They came without warning, violent, brilliant, irresistible. Later in life, Tesla would describe them as blinding flashes of light, often accompanied by visions so vivid that they replaced reality entirely. But as a boy, he didn't have the words. He only had the fear. And yet, within that fear lay something extraordinary. His mother, Juka, was not an educated woman in the formal sense, but she possessed a mind of astonishing creativity. She designed tools, invented household devices, memorized epic poems thousands of lines long. She had the kind of intelligence that did not need books to flourish, and Tesla adored her. He watched her weave wool, carve patterns, assemble tools, fix broken objects with nothing but her hands and imagination. He later said, "My mother was the first inventor I ever knew. It was from her that he learned the art of seeing the world not as it was, but as it could be." It was from her that he inherited the ability to visualize machines in perfect detail, down to the smallest gear. And it was her calm presence that soothed him during the episodes that frightened him most. Whenever the flashes inside his mind became unbearable, she would hold his shoulders, whispering, "Look at me, Nikola. Tell me what you see." And he would. He would describe shapes, colors, wheels, beams of light, machines that did not exist yet. Visions both beautiful and strange. She never mocked him, never dismissed him. She simply listened, as though her son were describing messages from a distant world. Perhaps in some way he was. But childhood was not made only of light. In the Tesla household lived another boy, Danilo, Nikola's older brother. Danilo was gifted, handsome, clever. Everyone said he would grow up to be the pride of the family. Nikola admired him deeply. He followed him everywhere, tried to imitate his walk, his posture, even the way he held a book. To Nikola, Danilo was everything. And then, one warm summer evening, tragedy tore the world apart. The details blurred with time, but the memory remained sharp enough to wound. In the simplest terms, Danilo died in an accident involving a horse. Some whispered that Nikola had startled the animal. Others said the story was more complicated. But one truth remained. Danilo was gone. And Nikola, just a boy, was left standing at the broken edge of a world that would never be whole again. His parents were devastated. His father fell into a sorrow so deep that he barely spoke for weeks. His mother moved through the house like a ghost, and in their grief, their eyes turned, unintentionally, toward the only remaining son. Suddenly, Nikola was no longer merely Nikola. He was a reminder, a replacement, a painful echo of the child they had lost. The pressure was crushing. Worse yet, some relatives whispered the unthinkable, that Nikola's strange behavior, his visions, his flashes, his storms of imagination, made him different, made him dangerous, made him the reason Danilo died. Those whispers poisoned the air, and they left a scar that would never truly heal. Tesla's visions grew even stronger after his brother's death. Sometimes they overwhelmed him so completely that he would collapse. The flashes of light became sharper, brighter, more intrusive. He described them as explosions of light inside my head, like someone had set off fireworks behind his eyes. When they came, he felt trapped in a world made entirely of brilliance and noise. He could not control them. He could not escape them. And no one understood, except his mother. She remained his anchor, gently pulling him back into the real world each time his mind drifted too far away. She taught him how to calm himself, how to direct the visions instead of being swallowed by them. And slowly, painfully, Tesla turned the curse into a tool. He discovered that he could control the images, shape them, rotate them, examine them as though they were real objects floating in front of him. He could imagine a machine, change its parts, run it at full speed in his mind, dismantle it, rebuild it, improve it, and never touch a single piece of metal. No sketches, no blueprints, no trial and error, just pure mental engineering. Most people dream in vague forms, fleeting images, half memories. Tesla dreamed in perfect precision, in dimensions, in motion, in sound. His visions were not fantasies, they were prototypes. But before he learned to use this gift, it nearly destroyed him. There was another shadow in Tesla's childhood, his relationship with his father, Milutin, a stern Serbian Orthodox priest. Milutin loved his son, but he did not understand him. He valued discipline, literature, scripture. He wanted Nikola to follow in his footsteps, become a priest, a scholar of faith, a man who controlled his passions. But Nikola's world was not made of scripture. It was made of lightning. He did not want sermons. He wanted stars, numbers, machines, forces unseen. This difference created tension, deep, painful tension that neither father nor son knew how to bridge. When Nikola spoke of his visions, his father frowned. When he described inventions, his father dismissed them as nonsense. And when the family compared him to Danilo, however unintentionally, something inside the young boy shattered. He became quieter, more withdrawn, more consumed by the world inside his mind. Yet within this quietness was a fire forming, a fire that would burn for the rest of his life. Years later, Tesla would famously say, "The desire to create a new world burned in me like a fever." That fever had started here, in Smiljan, in childhood visions of blinding light, in grief, in misunderstanding, in longing, in the unbearable pressure of living in the shadow of a lost brother. His insomnia began here too. How can a boy sleep when his mind never rests? How can a child close his eyes when the darkness is filled with lightning? How can anyone dream when visions are already too real? Long before he became the man who commanded electricity, Tesla was the boy who saw it. The boy who could not control his mind. The boy who could not escape his thoughts. The boy who could not sleep. And this sleeplessness, this restless fire, was about to shape everything he would become. In room 3327, Tesla opened his eyes slowly. The memory faded like a photograph turning to dust, but the feeling remained. The ache of childhood, the weight of expectation. The first sparks of the genius he would later unleash on the world. Lightning flashed outside again. He blinked once, twice, and whispered to the empty room. It began with light. The storm outside had quieted, but inside Tesla's memory, another storm rose. One made not of thunder and rain, but of thoughts, relentless and unending. As he leaned back in his chair, the dim light of the hotel lamp cast a long shadow on the wall, and he drifted again, further into the years when his mind transformed from a strange childhood curse into a force that would reshape the world. It began in adolescence, the time when most boys dream of adventure, of mischief, of the future. But Tesla did not dream in the same way. He calculated his future. While other boys played in the fields, chased dogs, or skipped stones across a stream, Nikola's mind churned with impossible questions. Why does lightning strike? What makes a wheel turn? Why do objects fall? What invisible forces govern the world? He was no longer frightened by the flashes of light in his head. He had learned to use them, to bend them, to follow them. But this new control came at a price paid with sleep. From his teenage years onward, Tesla rarely slept more than 2 or 3 hours. He tried. He truly tried. But the very moment he lay down, closed his eyes, and surrendered his body to the night, thoughts would rise like waves and crash with unbearable force. A simple idea could keep him awake for days. A single question could ignite an entire chain of thoughts, each leading to another, and another, and another, until the sun rose and the world woke again. He once wrote, "My brain is a tormented engine. When it starts, I cannot stop it." And indeed, the engine never stopped. Even in exhaustion, even in hunger, even when he felt faint, his mind remained lucid, sharp, merciless. It worked with a precision that frightened physicians, but Nikola accepted it as both his burden and his destiny. While others rested, he constructed bridges in his mind, machines made of copper and dreams, wheels turning with invisible currents. Entire cities powered by forces no one else could even imagine. His father, still hoping Nikola would join the clergy, insisted on discipline and quiet study. But Tesla's mind was too loud. When he tried to read scripture, equations danced between the lines. When he tried to pray, machines hummed behind his eyelids. When he tried to sleep, visions, bright, geometric, powerful, began spinning like gears. Sleep was impossible. Rest was impossible. Even silence was impossible. By the time he reached his late teens, Tesla's inner world had grown vast and terrifying. He developed an astonishing ability. He could visualize anything he thought of with photographic clarity. Not just shapes, not just colors, but three-dimensional objects rotating in space, complete systems with every part detailed, down to the screws and the friction points. He could design an engine in his mind, run it at full speed, watch it fail, identify the flaw, adjust the piece, and run it again, all before picking up a pencil. This mental laboratory was flawless, infinite, unrestricted, and always active. If the world had seen what he saw, if they had witnessed the churning, ceaseless brilliance inside his skull, they might have understood why Tesla seemed always on the edge of collapse, why his hands often trembled, why his voice sometimes cracked from fatigue, why he paced at night like a prisoner trapped inside himself. His intelligence was not quiet. It was violent. When he left Smiljan to pursue education in Karlovac and later at the Polytechnic Institute in Graz, Tesla finally found something that felt like home: mathematics and physics, the languages that matched the rhythm of his mind. In lecture halls, professors explained electromagnetism, thermodynamics, mechanical design, but Tesla absorbed it all so quickly, so naturally, that even instructors were startled. He did not merely learn the formulas, he saw them. Every equation became an image. Every principle became a moving structure. Every lecture became fuel for the machine inside him. One professor famously told him, "Tesla, if you do not slow down, you will burn yourself out." But Tesla could not slow down. He did not know how. He read textbooks as if devouring them. He attended classes from dawn until night. Then he returned to his dormitory and studied by candlelight until the wax ran out. Then he continued studying in darkness, reciting formulas from memory, imagining machines turning in the shadows. By his second year, Tesla was so consumed by study that he often forgot to eat. Days passed without sleep, weeks without rest. At one point, he collapsed from overwork, and doctors warned him that his heart might fail if he continued. But he still could not stop. His mind would not allow it. During this period, Tesla made a discovery that would define his life: the concept of a rotating magnetic field, an idea that would later become the foundation of the modern world, the beating heart of every AC motor, every electrical grid, every factory, every home that draws power from an alternating current. The idea came to Tesla not through calculation, but through a vision. He was walking with a friend in a park at sunset when the sky suddenly ignited with orange and purple streaks. As the colors filled his eyes, the flashes inside his mind responded. And in that moment, in a burst of metal lightning, he saw the entire system: coils, currents, rotation, perfect and complete. He grabbed a stick and drew diagrams in the dirt. His friend stared, confused. But Tesla knew he had seen the future, and he knew it would not let him sleep. Not now. Not ever. His insomnia worsened. As his ideas became grander, sleep felt even more unnecessary, almost like an obstacle. He believed deeply that he could train his mind the same way one trains muscles, forcing it to work at extreme levels. Sometimes he slept 2 hours, sometimes none. He ate 1 or 2 light meals, walked long distances to stimulate thought, and carried a notebook everywhere. But beneath his brilliance lay a darker truth. Tesla was burning. Inside his skull, the gears spun faster and faster. His visions grew more frequent, more intense. He saw flashes of light, even in daylight. At times, he would freeze mid-sentence because a new idea had erupted in his mind. Those around him began whispering that Tesla was unstable, too strange, too intense, too awake. But Tesla did not care. He embraced the sleeplessness because it was the source of his genius. The price was his body, his peace, and sometimes his sanity. But the reward was the future. In the rare hours when exhaustion finally forced him to lie down, Tesla could not rest. He described his attempts at sleep as a battle with the mind. The moment he closed his eyes, the machinery in his head roared to life. Visions of wheels, sparks, coils, electrical arcs dancing across the darkness. He would sit up abruptly, drenched in sweat, with a new idea already fully formed. His heart raced, his mind accelerated. There was no escape, no silence. His body begged for sleep. His brain refused. This was the defining contradiction of Tesla's life. His greatest strength was also the enemy that stalked him through the night. Years later, he would confess, "If I could strip away the visions, perhaps I would sleep. But without them, I would not be who I am." This was the truth he learned in youth. Genius is not peaceful. Genius is not kind. Genius does not sleep. And for Tesla, the world inside his mind was far louder than the world outside. As Tesla sat once more in room 3327, his breath soft and slow, he felt the weight of those sleepless years pressing against his chest. He had lived more nights awake than asleep. He had built more machines in his mind than most men could build in a lifetime. He whispered to himself, barely audible, "My mind never rested. Perhaps it never was meant to." Lightning flickered again outside the window, casting a brief glow across his tired face. A reminder that the storm inside him had begun long before the storm outside, and it had never stopped. The storm outside Tesla's New York window faded into a soft hum, like a distant machine slowing down. But as his mind traveled backward through time, another storm, one of ambition, of hope, and of inevitable conflict, began to rise. It carried him across the Atlantic Ocean, back to the year 1884, when a young Nikola Tesla stepped onto American soil for the first time. He arrived in New York City with a single suitcase, a few poems, a handful of calculations, and 4 cents in his pocket. But he also carried something far more powerful, an idea burning so fiercely inside him that not even the ocean winds could extinguish it. The idea of alternating current, a system the world had not yet embraced, but which Tesla believed with complete certainty would change everything. And he came to America with one goal in mind: to meet Thomas Alva Edison. New York in the 1880s was a place of noise, smoke, and furious invention. The streets were packed with steam-powered carriages, cable cars, and men in dusty coats shouting over one another. Construction rang from every corner as the city rose upward in steel and glass. For Tesla, whose mind was always filled with machines, the city felt alive, pulsing, mechanical, vibrating with the energy of a nation rushing headfirst into the future. But he had barely set foot on American soil when his suitcase was stolen. His money vanished. His letters of introduction almost lost. He was alone, a stranger in a roaring industrial world that cared for no one. And yet, as Tesla later said, "I felt that the land of freedom would not reject me." He slept little. He ate less. But he pushed forward until he found work repairing electrical motors for a small company. He worked with such speed and precision, often fixing in minutes what other workers spent days unraveling, that news of the young European wizard began to spread. Eventually, it reached the ears of one man, a man already considered a giant in the world of invention, Thomas Edison. The day Tesla first entered Edison's laboratory remains one of the most mythologized moments in technological history. But behind the myth lies a simple truth. The meeting was inevitable. Edison's offices were chaotic, packed with tools, wires, glass bulbs, half-finished prototypes, and stacks of papers that seemed to defy gravity. Assistants hurried across the floor carrying lamps and coils, while typewriters clattered like mechanical insects. In the middle of it all stood Edison himself, thick-haired, confident, direct, with the aura of a man who believed completely in the power of hard work and relentless experimentation. If Tesla's genius was silent, mathematical, internal, Edison's was loud, physical, empirical. One relied on visions, the other on trial and error. They were destined to clash long before they ever shook hands. Edison looked up from a cluttered table as Tesla was introduced. The young inventor's thin frame, immaculate suit, and intense blue eyes contrasted sharply with the messy, energetic environment around him. Edison studied him for a long, curious moment. "So," he finally said, "you're the man who can fix anything." Tesla lowered his head modestly. "I will do my best, Mr. Edison." And thus began a relationship that history would forever remember, not as a friendship, but as a collision. Tesla was assigned the most difficult and frustrating tasks in Edison's workshop: repairing broken DC generators, redesigning motors, fixing lighting systems that constantly overheated or failed. And he worked with superhuman endurance. While other workers ended their shifts at dusk, Tesla stayed until dawn. He often ate nothing but a small meal of bread and milk, believing heavy food slowed his mind. And always, his thoughts circled around one belief: direct current is not the future. Alternating current is. But Edison refused to listen. Direct current was his child, his empire. His factories produced DC generators. His lighting systems ran on DC power. His investors poured millions into DC networks. DC was his identity. So when Tesla timidly suggested improvements, Edison cut him off. "Spare me that nonsense," he said. "Your ideas are magnificent, but they are utterly impractical." Tesla felt his chest tighten, but he did not argue. Not yet. He respected Edison deeply, admired his persistence, envied his influence. Tesla believed, against all odds, that they might one day work together on something grand. But the deeper he stepped into Edison's world, the more he realized the truth. Edison did not want a partner. He wanted a soldier. And Tesla, delicate, brilliant, idealistic Tesla, was not made for war. Still, he worked relentlessly. One night, Edison called Tesla into his office and presented him a challenge that many historians still debate. He offered Tesla the monumental task of redesigning Edison's entire system of DC generators, improving efficiency, reducing breakdowns, and solving persistent overheating, problems that plagued cities across America. And then came the promise: "Do it, and I will give you $50,000. Tesla was stunned. $50,000 was a fortune, enough to build his own lab 10 times over. Enough to bring his alternating current dreams to life. And so, with the fiery determination of youth, he accepted. For months, he barely slept. He lived inside the lab, surrounded by wires and iron and rotating machinery. He redesigned generator after generator, corrected flaws others had overlooked, improved mechanical tolerances, and reorganized entire systems. When he finally presented his work, Edison's engineers were astonished. The improvements were real. The machines ran smoother, cooler, faster. Tesla had done exactly what he promised. He approached Edison exhausted and hopeful. "I completed the task, Mr. Edison." Edison looked up calmly and said, "Tesla, you don't understand the American sense of humor." Followed by, "When you become a full-time American, you will appreciate a good joke." He offered Tesla a raise of $10 a week instead. Tesla felt something inside him fracture. Not anger, but disappointment so sharp it cut like glass. He realized then that Edison would never see him as an equal, never honor his promises, never share Tesla's vision for the future. The two men, one master of the physical, one master of the mind, stood on opposite sides of a chasm that would never be bridged. Tesla resigned the next day, He walked out of Edison's workshop and into the uncertain air of New York, jobless, hungry, nearly penniless once again. But he left with something far more powerful than a paycheck: his conviction. His belief that alternating current, the elegant, efficient, beautiful system he saw so clearly, would one day conquer the world. The moment he stepped into the sunlight, he whispered to himself, "This is the beginning, not the end." And in many ways, it was. The meeting with Edison was not fate's mistake. It was fate's spark, a spark that would ignite the greatest electrical war the world had ever seen, a war Tesla did not want, but one he could not avoid. Lightning illuminated the sky outside room 3327 once again, and Tesla's eyes opened slowly. He felt no anger when he remembered Edison, only a quiet sadness and a strange respect. For without Edison, Tesla might never have found the fire to pursue his destiny. Without Edison, the world might have remained in darkness. Without Edison, there would be no war of currents, and without that war, there would be no triumph. Tesla whispered into the quiet room, "Even my adversaries brought me closer to the truth." The storm outside resumed its rhythm, and the story moved forward, toward conflict, electricity, and the future. The memory of Edison's joke, his dismissal, his broken promise, lingered like the fading echo of thunder. But as Tesla sat in room 3327 decades later, he did not feel anger, only inevitability. That moment had set off a chain reaction he could never escape. A reaction that would ignite one of the most violent scientific battles in history. A battle of ideas, a battle of egos, a battle of currents, the war of currents. In 1885, after leaving Edison's laboratory with nothing but pride and vision, Tesla walked the streets of New York with a strange combination of despair and determination. He had no money, no allies, no laboratory, and no way to build the machines that lived so vividly inside his mind. But he had something more powerful than all of that: an unshakable belief in alternating current. Direct current, Edison's creation, had flaws Tesla could not tolerate. DC flowed in only one direction, requiring thick cables, limited range, massive power plants placed only a few blocks apart. It was inefficient, expensive, and fundamentally unsuited for the future Tesla envisioned. Alternating current was different. AC oscillated, reversing direction many times each second. It could travel immense distances with minimal loss. It required lighter infrastructure. It promised power for everyone, not just the wealthy cities, not just the urban elite, but remote towns, rural homes, entire nations. Where Edison saw engineering problems, Tesla saw mathematical beauty. Where Edison saw impracticality, Tesla saw destiny. But destiny is powerless without opportunity. For months after leaving Edison, Tesla struggled simply to survive. He took odd jobs, dug ditches, carried heavy loads in the freezing wind. He went from designing complex machinery to laboring with shovels on the streets of New York. His hands bleeding, his mind burning with ideas far too large for the trenches he stood in. Yet even during those humiliating days, Tesla thought constantly of AC, how to generate it, how to control it, how to prove it to the world. In his spare moments, he scribbled equations on scraps of paper, drew coils in the dirt, whispered to himself under his breath as he imagined magnetic fields rotating like shimmering halos. He refused to let the future slip away. And then, when all seemed lost, two investors appeared, Alfred Brown and Charles Peck, businessmen who had heard rumors of a strange European genius with radical ideas about electricity. They listened as Tesla outlined his vision. He spoke softly, precisely, like someone describing a world that already existed. Peck and Brown exchanged glances. "Mr. Tesla," Peck said, "we believe there's something in you the world hasn't seen yet." And with that, Tesla received what Edison never gave him, a chance. With funding secured, Tesla rented a small laboratory on Liberty Street. For the first time in his life, he had a space where his visions could become physical. He worked like a man possessed. Coils, magnets, rotors, stators, parts and shapes spun around him as he assembled his dreams piece by piece. Sparks flew, copper wires glowed, tools clanged and hissed. Tesla often forgot to eat, sometimes forgot to speak, lost completely in the dance of fields and frequencies. And then, one midnight, he stopped. He placed his hands gently on a device he had built from nothing but memory and calculation. The world's first practical AC induction motor. He connected the wires, stepped back, and flipped the switch. The motor hummed, then rotated, smooth, silent, perfect. A rotating magnetic field, something the scientific world considered impossible, had been conjured from the space within Tesla's mind. He had done it. He had built the future. And now the world needed to see. Tesla's motor caught the attention of George Westinghouse, the man who would become Edison's greatest rival. Westinghouse was bold, forward-thinking, and willing to gamble everything on a new idea. When he met Tesla, he saw not a dreamer, but a revolutionary. He bought Tesla's patents on the spot. He offered him $2.50 in royalties for every horsepower produced by his AC system, a deal that would have made Tesla one of the richest men in American history. And, more importantly, Westinghouse promised him a platform, a chance to build, a chance to change the world. Together, they began constructing an AC power network, one that could stretch across entire cities, that could light homes blocks away, that could bring electricity to people Edison's DC systems would never reach. But Edison was not a man who accepted defeat quietly. When he learned that Tesla had joined Westinghouse, when he learned that AC was gaining support, something hardened inside him, a conviction, a fear, a fury. It launched a campaign unlike anything the world of science had seen before. Edison's war against AC was brutal, personal, and relentless. He told newspapers that AC was dangerous, deadly, a menace. He claimed Tesla's system would kill innocent people in their homes. He wrote letters, gave speeches, spread panic. But words were not enough. Edison began staging public electrocutions, using AC to kill animals, dogs, calves, even an elephant, to prove the deadly nature of Tesla's ideas. These demonstrations horrified the public. They horrified Tesla even more. Tesla believed electricity was a gift to humanity, something pure and transformative. The idea of using it as a weapon made him physically ill. But Edison was winning hearts, winning headlines, turning fear into a weapon sharper than any scientific argument. The newspapers followed him, investors hesitated, people were afraid. The whisper began spreading across America. AC kills. Tesla did not fight back with cruelty. He fought back with brilliance. He demonstrated AC's safety by passing current through his own body, lighting lamps with his hands, standing calmly as arcs of blue electricity danced around him like spirits. Audiences gasped, astonished. They saw not a threat, but magic. Yet despite these demonstrations, the battle raged on. Lawsuits, sabotage, misinformation, political pressure. Tesla and Westinghouse stood together against Edison's empire. But they were under constant attack. Factories burned, contracts collapsed, money bled away. Still, Tesla refused to quit. He believed AC was not just a technology, but a moral truth, a way to bring power to the world, not just the wealthy. And slowly, quietly, the tide began to turn. More engineers supported AC. More cities grew interested. More investors recognized the potential. Then came the opportunity that would change everything. An opportunity that would bring the war of currents to its climax. A chance to harness one of the most powerful forces in nature, Niagara Falls. But that was a story for the next chapter. Lightning flashed outside Tesla's New York window as the memory faded. He leaned forward slightly, as though feeling again the tension of those early battles, the doubt, the hope, the fire. He whispered to himself, "War reveals the truth of men, and electricity reveals the truth of the world." The storm answered with a distant rumble, and Tesla's story prepared to fall into the roar of Niagara. The rain against the hotel window softened to a whisper, like fading applause from a distant audience. Tesla's mind drifted again, over the roar of storms, over the shadows of conflict, over the ashes left by the war with Edison, toward a moment brighter than lightning itself. A moment when the impossible finally bowed to vision. A moment named Niagara. In the late 1880s, as the war of currents intensified, a monumental challenge emerged, one that captured the imagination of engineers around the world. The Cataract Construction Company, newly formed and supremely ambitious, announced a project so immense that newspapers called it madness, folly, a dream built on water. The plan? Harness the full power of Niagara Falls to electrify the world. For nearly a century, inventors had attempted solutions. Dozens of proposals were submitted. Hydraulic schemes, compressed air engines, steam devices, mechanical transmissions spanning miles. All flawed, all abandoned. The world's brightest engineers declared the problem unsolvable. Niagara was too wild, too violent, too powerful to tame. To the scientific community, the falls were a symbol of nature's triumph over human ambition. But to Tesla, Niagara was not an obstacle. It was an invitation. The roar of water, the mist rising above the gorge, the relentless thunder. It called to him the way lightning had called to him since childhood. Inside that roar, he heard rhythm, frequency, oscillation. He saw coils, gears, fields circulating like vortices, spinning like halos around invisible currents. Where others saw chaos, Tesla saw a giant generator waiting to be born. And so, when the Niagara Commission began evaluating designs, two names rose to the top: Edison, Tesla. The old rivals stood once again at the edge of destiny. Edison argued fiercely for direct current. He insisted DC was safer, simpler, more civilized. He proposed massive iron conduits, heavy wiring, and a network of power stations that would devour money without producing scalable results. His pitch was based on fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of AC, fear of Tesla's brilliance. Tesla's proposal, by contrast, was elegant. Use the mighty water to spin turbines. Convert the motion to alternating current. Transform the voltage high enough to travel miles without loss. Distribute power across entire cities with minimal infrastructure. Build a future where electricity flowed like air, invisible, silent, everywhere. But many commissioners were skeptical. Tesla, after all, was the idealist, the dreamer, the immigrant with visions too large, too strange, too beautiful. Edison was familiar, established, trusted. The debate raged for months. Behind the scenes, Edison continued to whisper that AC was deadly. He used the newspapers. He used fear. He used his influence like a club. But then, slowly, quietly, the engineers reviewing Tesla's system realized something profound. AC was not just better. It was the only solution that made Niagara possible. No other system could carry energy long distances. No other system could scale beyond a few miles. No other system matched the enormous potential of the falls. Edison had brought the world the first electric light, but Tesla had brought the future. And so, in 1893, against all predictions, the Commission made a decision that would echo through 100 generations. They awarded the Niagara contract to George Westinghouse. using Tesla's alternating current system. The impossible dream belonged to Tesla now. Nearly 10 years of planning and construction followed. The site at Niagara became a kingdom of mud, cranes, concrete, and sweat. Thousands of workers swarmed the gorge. Steel beams were hammered, turbines forged, copper wires stretched across the earth like veins of a new creature being born. Tesla visited often. He walked among the machinery with a kind of reverence, as if the entire site were a cathedral to electricity. He spoke softly to engineers, explaining invisible forces with the clarity of a man describing something he could see floating in the air. He corrected minor errors with a few strokes of chalk. He comforted doubtful workers with the quiet certainty of someone who had already witnessed the outcome inside his mind. At night, away from the crowds, he stood at the edge of the roaring water, mist soaking his coat, and listened to the eternal thunder. The falls spoke to him, not in words, but in frequencies. In their rhythm, he felt his childhood visions return, the bright flashes, the inner storms. The same energy that had once tormented him now felt like an embrace. He whispered to the water, "We will work together, you and I." And the water roared back. In 1895, the great moment approached. The first AC generator, Tesla's generator, was complete. A colossal machine the size of a locomotive, engineered with precision that bordered on poetic. 10,000 horsepower surged through its design. Sheets of polished steel mirrored the lantern light. Coils wound in perfect geometry glowed faintly like sleeping serpents. The engineers stood before it in awe. Tesla stood before it in silence. The chief foreman cleared his throat. "Mr. Tesla," he said, "we're ready." Tesla nodded once. "Begin." The turbine doors opened. Water thundered in. The generator shuddered, then began to turn. Slow at first, then faster and faster. A deep hum filled the chamber. The ground trembled. The air vibrated. Then suddenly, light. Pure, white, beautiful light burst across the control panels, dancing up the copper lines, illuminating the great hall from floor to ceiling. The generator roared alive like a titan awakening after 1,000 years. Niagara, the ancient fury of nature, had been captured, harnessed, transformed. The dream was real. Tesla closed his eyes, not to sleep, no, he had never slept easily, but to mark the moment in his mind, to burn it into the architecture of memory. This was the triumph of his life. But the true miracle was still to come. The electricity from Niagara needed to travel, miles across fields, forests, and farmland, to reach Buffalo, New York, the first city scheduled to receive AC power. If AC faltered, if the system failed, if a single transformer collapsed, the world would mock Tesla forever. Edison would be vindicated. Investors would flee. The future would collapse. But Tesla was calm. He knew. He had seen it all before in the theater of his mind. On the night of November 16, 1896, crowds gathered in Buffalo. The mayor waited anxiously. Newspapers whispered predictions. People looked at dark street lamps with skepticism and hope. Shortly after midnight, a telegraph arrived from Niagara. "Power is coming." Silence fell. Then, with a soft crack, the lamps flickered. A second crack, brighter. A third, and the entire city of Buffalo exploded into light. Gasps, cheers, shouts, tears. For the first time in history, electricity traveled across great distances, clean and strong, carried effortlessly by alternating current. Tesla had awakened the modern world. A reporter wrote, "It is as though the sun has risen at midnight." Tesla, sitting quietly in a New York hotel, simply whispered, "Of course, that is what AC was meant to do." Niagara's success sent shockwaves across the globe. Cities demanded AC grids, factories begged for AC motors, inventors rushed to redesign their machines, and Edison's empire, built on direct current, began to crumble. The war of currents ended not with violence, nor with words, nor with politics. It ended with a waterfall. Tesla had not just won a scientific battle, he had changed the course of human history. For the rest of his life, Tesla carried Niagara inside him, not as a victory to brag about, but as a reminder that even the wildest forces of nature could be brought into harmony with the human mind. Lightning flashed again outside room 3327. Tesla watched it quietly and whispered, "I once captured a waterfall." Lightning was always next. The storm answered with a distant rumble, and Tesla's story moved toward the invention that would make him immortal. The glowing, screaming, spiraling heart of wireless electricity. The Tesla Coil. The echoes of Niagara still vibrated inside Tesla's mind as he sat in the dim glow of room 3327. The triumph was real, yes, but triumph had never brought him rest. If anything, success only sharpened the engine inside him, pushing it into even more dangerous speeds. For most men, victory is a moment of peace. For Tesla, victory was fuel. And so the sleepless nights continued. In the years following Niagara's triumph, Tesla found himself at a strange intersection of fame and solitude. His name spread across newspapers, whispered in universities, discussed in scientific circles with a mixture of awe and disbelief. Some called him a genius. Others called him insane. Many could not decide which word fit better, yet fame did nothing to soothe him. Tesla moved into a new laboratory on Houston Street, an airy, high-ceilinged space filled with sunlight by day and electric fire by night. The walls were lined with coils, capacitors, transformers, metal spheres, and instruments that looked like sculptures forged from lightning. Visitors described the laboratory as a cathedral of electricity. Tesla saw it as a sanctuary, a place where he could continue working without interruption, without explanation, without sleep. He was not merely building machines, he was building a world that only he could see. Tesla's daily routine was anything but ordinary. He woke at dawn, if one could call it waking, since he barely slept at all. He ate almost nothing, believing food clouded the mind. He walked miles each day, letting the rhythm of his steps guide his thoughts. He refused physical contact, convinced that shaking hands drained his energy. He avoided sunlight, loud music, and the chaos of everyday life. What he sought was isolation, silence, precision, but above all, work. Because inside Tesla's mind, ideas did not simply appear, they erupted. One moment, he would be adjusting a coil. The next moment, he would freeze, eyes unfocused, as an entire invention unfolded before him like a blooming flower. Colleagues sometimes found him standing motionless for minutes at a time, breathing softly, lost inside a vision so vivid that the real world disappeared behind it. When they asked what he was thinking, he often replied, "Everything." But what he meant was this: machines, currents, frequencies, patterns of light, invisible forces, mathematical symphonies. His thoughts were not scattered, they were infinite. As Tesla's insomnia deepened, his relationship with time became strange, elastic, almost irrelevant. Days and nights blurred together in a stream of invention, testing, and breakthroughs that seemed impossible for a single human mind. He rarely sat. He rarely slept. He rarely stopped. When he did rest, it was only for 15 or 20 minutes, a short, strange state he described as recharging. Others called it madness. Tesla called it efficiency. "I do not need sleep," he once said. "I need thought." And thought he had, relentless, burning, unstoppable. But with brilliance came torment. His senses, always sensitive, began to sharpen to unnatural extremes. The ticking of a clock sounded like hammers. The rustle of paper felt like thunder. The smallest vibration, the faintest hum, the softest footstep could disrupt concentration and sent him spiraling into agitation. Doctors suspected a neurological disorder. Tesla insisted it was refinement, a tuning of perception, like adjusting a radio to a higher frequency. Whatever the truth, the result was the same. Tesla could not exist in chaos, so he lived in controlled solitude. Every object in his room had a fixed position, every chair the exact distance from the table, every window shade pulled to a determined height, every notebook arranged by category, date, voltage, or experiment type. He washed his hands compulsively. He counted his steps. He avoided pearls because their texture disturbed him. He refused to enter a room with hair on the floor. He demanded multiples of 3 in everything: napkins, towels, utensils. To outsiders, these were symptoms. To Tesla, they were structure. Order was the only way to survive the storm inside his head. By now, Tesla's nights were more active than most people's days. When darkness fell, others slept, but Tesla's laboratory lit up in dazzling spectrums of blue and violet. Giant coils sparked arcs that slithered across the room like electric serpents. Transformers howled with mechanical voices. Metal spheres glowed, rising above the tables as if levitating. Sheets of plasma flickered in the air. Rotating discs blurred into halos. Some nights, Tesla stood in the center of the room, completely still, as bolts of electricity danced around him in controlled spirals. The light wrapped him like a cloak, casting moving shadows that made him appear less like a man and more like a figure carved from the storm. There were moments when witnesses felt as if they were watching a wizard conjuring elements, not a scientist operating machinery. And Tesla, lost in the music of voltage, looked almost divine. But genius is a double-edged blade. As his inventions grew more spectacular, Tesla became increasingly isolated. He refused invitations. He avoided crowds. He rejected friendships that required emotional labor. He shunned romance entirely, convinced that intimacy would disrupt his mental clarity. "I do not have the time to waste on such things," he said. "My work consumes me completely." Some believed him cold. Others believed him tragic. But Tesla believed he was simply honest. He could not be normal. He did not want to be. Yet even in isolation, Tesla was not immune to suffering. Years of insomnia began carving deep shadows beneath his eyes. His hands trembled when he lifted tools. His body, so thin it seemed carved from wire, grew weaker by the month. Sometimes he collapsed after long nights, waking hours later on the floor, his mind still racing even as his limbs refused to move. But when assistants insisted he slow down, he shook his head. "There is no time," he whispered. "There is only work." Because Tesla knew something others did not. The future was fragile, and the window to shape it was closing. One night, after days without sleep, Tesla was struck by a vision so powerful it nearly brought him to his knees. He stood in the middle of his laboratory, surrounded by coils that hummed like distant choirs. His breath was uneven, his heartbeat sharp. In the space before him, in the darkness lit only by sparks, he saw the shape of something extraordinary. A device capable of sending electric energy through the air, without wires, without limits, without borders. A machine that would become the signature of his life, the Tesla Coil. It came to him like a lightning strike. A blueprint complete. Flawless, inevitable. He whispered to himself, "This is the key, this is the next step." And from that moment on, Tesla drove himself even deeper into sleeplessness. Because the world in his mind was calling. Calling with voltage. Calling with vision. Calling with the promise of a new era lit not by wires, but by air. Tesla's story was entering its most explosive chapter. The sleepless inventor was about to create the machine that would forever carry his name. The laboratory was dark, except for the faint glow of the city outside. New York's restless heartbeat pulsing through the windows. Tesla stood alone in the center of the room, surrounded by machines sleeping under sheets of canvas, their metallic shapes rising and falling like dormant creatures waiting to be awakened. He hadn't slept in nearly 2 days, perhaps 3. Time flowed strangely around him now, elastic, untrustworthy. But his mind was sharper than ever. Because tonight, the storm inside his skull had delivered something extraordinary. A vision unlike any he had experienced before. A blueprint so complete, so perfect, so luminous in detail that it felt less like an invention and more like a memory. A device that would breathe electricity into the air itself. A machine capable of producing arcs of pure energy. A tool that would unlock wireless power. A spark of the future. The Tesla Coil. Tesla did not begin with sketches. He never did. Well, to him, invention was not an act of drawing. It was an act of seeing. He closed his eyes, and the machine appeared in his mind as a rotating structure. A toroidal field here. A primary coil wrapped at this angle. A secondary coil wound with precise spacing. A capacitor bank accumulating charge like a lightning reservoir. A discharge terminal shaped to guide the arcs. Every detail emerged in perfect clarity. He could rotate it mentally, zoom into the wires, watch invisible fields pulse through the copper, hear the frequencies resonating like a tuning fork. No engineer alive could do what he did. Construct entire devices in the mind and test them without touching a single tool. When he opened his eyes, the real world felt dull in comparison. But that was fine, because now it was time to pull the vision from the air into reality. Tesla rolled up his sleeves, lit the lamps, and began gathering materials. The laboratory stirred awake beneath his hands. Gears clinking, tools clattering, wires unfurling like metallic vines. He worked with a kind of feverish calm. No blueprints, no assistance, no hesitation, only purpose. He started with the primary coil, winding thick copper wire into a flat spiral. Each turn calculated, each gap measured. He hummed quietly as he worked. Not a tune, but a frequency, a habit he developed to align his thoughts with the resonance of the machine. Next came the secondary coil, tall and elegant, wrapped with hundreds of turns of fine wire. It glimmered red gold under the lamplight, like a column of woven sunlight. Tesla paused, running a hand gently along its surface. He whispered, almost reverently, "You will sing." Then he constructed the capacitors, the pulse-beating heart of the system, oil-filled jars that stored energy like bottled lightning. He arranged them with geometric precision, as though building an altar. At last came the discharge terminal, a polished metal sphere, smooth as an eye and cold as a planet. He lifted it with both hands, feeling its weight in his trembling fingers. He mounted it at the top of the secondary coil, tightening the last bolt. Then he stepped back. The machine stood before him now, tall, silent, coiled with potential. A copper serpent waiting for a command, a conductor's baton waiting to summon symphonies of lightning. Tesla exhaled. The vision was now real. It was past midnight when he connected the final wires. The laboratory was quiet except for the hum of the city and the soft whisper of the coils settling into their places. Tesla lit a few more lamps and looked at the coil from different angles, inspecting it like a sculptor evaluating a finished statue. The room felt charged. Not electrically, but spiritually, as if something unseen stood on the edge of awakening. Tesla moved to the power supply, fingers trembling, not from fear, but from awe. He adjusted the switches. He calibrated the frequency. He tuned the spark gap. Then he placed his hand on the main control lever. A long breath. Silence. And then he pulled it. The reaction was instantaneous. A deep thrum shook the air. The room vibrated. The copper coils awakened like serpents rising from sleep. A flicker, a pulse, a blinding burst. Then lightning. Pure, violet blue, crackling lightning exploded from the terminal sphere, arcing across the air in branching tendrils. The entire laboratory erupted in light, shadows dancing wildly across the walls. The arcs grew longer, louder. The air smelled of ozone and fire. Every hair on Tesla's arm stood up as waves of electricity rippled over him, and he stepped closer. Electricity snarled like a beast, but Tesla smiled. The arcs wrapped around him, spiraling in perfect harmony, never touching him but forming halos of plasma around his silhouette. He held out a hand, and blue fire curled around his fingers like a living ribbon. Witnesses would later recall nights when Tesla walked through fields of artificial lightning, his body glowing as if made of ghostly luminescence. Tonight was the first time he became that figure, the man standing inside the storm. He whispered into the electric roar, "Beautiful?" Because to him, lightning was not danger. Lightning was language. And for the first time in history, a man had spoken it fluently. The Tesla coil was not merely a machine, it was a revolution. It proved electricity could be shaped, directed, transmitted through open air. To show the world, Tesla arranged public demonstrations. He invited journalists, scientists, professors, anyone willing to see what he had created. They gathered in his laboratory, nervous, skeptical, uncertain. Tesla dimmed the lamps until the room was almost dark. He approached the coil, and with a small, elegant motion, activated it. The explosion of light stunned everyone. Tendrils of purple lightning leapt across the room. Flames of ionized air rose from the coil like phantoms. Tesla stood calm, wearing a metal suit or holding glowing tubes that lit without wires, evidence of wireless transmission. He offered no theatrical speech, no dramatic gesture. Instead, he simply said, "This is the future." Some fainted, some applauded, some ran out terrified, but all agreed on one thing. They had witnessed something from another world. Yet, even as applause echoed, Tesla's thoughts were already racing ahead. The coil was only the beginning. What if entire cities could be powered from a distance? What if ships could receive energy through the atmosphere? What if lightning could be controlled like water? What if the entire Earth could resonate at a single frequency, delivering electricity to any point on the globe? These were not fantasies to him. They were pathways, mathematical inevitabilities. The coil was a doorway, and Tesla was ready to step through it. But he did not know, could not have known, that the world was not ready to follow him. His vision demanded resources, courage, imagination, and humanity lacked all three. The coil would bring him brilliance, yes, but it would also begin his fall. Because when a man shows the world the impossible, the world applauds, and then demands even more. And when he cannot deliver instantly, the applause becomes suspicion, then silence, then exile. But for now, on this night, the lightning danced for Tesla alone. He turned off the machine. The room dimmed back to calm. The afterimage of the violet arcs remained burning behind his eyes. He whispered to himself, "This is only the beginning." The storm outside room 3327 answered with a distant roll of thunder, as if saluting the man who had dared to summon lightning indoors. And Tesla, exhausted but awake, always awake, closed his eyes not to rest, but to imagine the next chapter. Wardenclyffe, the tower that would try to speak to the world, the dream that would almost end him. The memory of the Tesla coil still glowed in Tesla's mind like a fading violet flame. Its arcs, its music, its promise. They had ignited something inside him, something vast and unstoppable. But the coil was only a spark. The vision was far larger. It was nothing less than a new world. A world where electricity moved through the air like breath, where energy flowed freely to every home, every ship, every factory, every corner of the earth. No wires, no fuel, no limits. A world illuminated not by industry, but by imagination. And the beating heart of that world would be a tower, a colossal crown-shaped structure meant to whisper to the sky. A tower named Wardenclyffe. The idea came to Tesla with frightening clarity. He envisioned a structure taller than any building he'd ever worked on. A metal skeleton rising above the trees, crowned by a massive copper dome that would pulse with electrical resonance. Beneath the tower, enormous iron pipes would be driven deep into the earth, like the roots of a metallic tree, reaching into the planet's natural electrical field. He believed that by tuning the tower to the right frequency, he could use the Earth itself as a giant conductor, sending power anywhere on the globe, wirelessly, instantly, elegantly. He dreamed of a world where energy was free from wires, free from corporations, free from the hands of those who controlled access to electricity, like kings controlling water. Tesla wanted to give power to the world, not sell it. And that dream, noble as it was, would become his downfall. To build Wardenclyffe, Tesla needed a patron, a titan of industry, someone powerful enough to finance a dream that would cost millions. He found one in J.P. Morgan. Morgan was the king of Wall Street, the architect of empires, a man who could move the world with a single investment. He was also cold, calculating, and uninterested in idealism. But he listened when Tesla spoke. They met in a Manhattan office lined with mahogany and velvet, the aroma of cigars lingering in the air. Morgan watched Tesla pace the room, eyes burning, voice steady. Tesla described a tower that could send wireless telegraph signals across oceans. He spoke of instant communication between continents. He emphasized the commercial potential, the military applications, the profit. He did not mention free energy, not yet. He knew Morgan would never finance a dream that had no financial return. And so Morgan agreed. He offered Tesla $150,000, a staggering sum for the eras, to build the first global communication tower. Wardenclyffe was born. In 1901, construction began on Long Island, on a vast expanse of windswept land surrounded by pine trees and open sky. The site smelled of mud, salt air, and fresh timber. Piles of lumber and steel beams lay scattered like bones waiting to be assembled. Tesla arrived on the site wearing a tailored suit, white gloves, and a hat that he removed only to feel the wind on his face. Workers watched him curiously as he placed his hand against the earth, whispering calculations under his breath. He oversaw everything: the digging, the foundations, the placement of the 120-foot tower, the installation of the 68-ton copper dome. He moved among the workers like a conductor among musicians, guiding, correcting, inspiring. Though many did not understand him, they respected him. They sensed they were part of something monumental. The tower slowly rose, a wooden lattice climbing toward the clouds, its dome gleaming like a bronze sun. Tesla's dream was taking shape, but so were his problems. Halfway through construction, Tesla's priorities shifted. He had initially promised Morgan a wireless telegraph system, a way to send messages across oceans faster than any cable. But Tesla's true ambition had always been larger than telegraphy. Now, seeing the tower rise, he could no longer restrain himself. He expanded the design. He added machinery. He modified the foundations. He upgraded the capacitors. He refined the underground conductors. Costs exploded. Workers complained. Supplies ran dry. Bills piled up on Tesla's desk like fallen leaves. But the dream demanded more. Tesla believed he could make the tower do everything: transmit messages, transmit energy, transmit power, transmit light. He believed that by tuning the Earth's frequency, the tower could send electricity anywhere on the planet. Imagine lamps glowing in villages without wires, ships crossing oceans powered from the shore, factories running without fuel, homes lit without cost, free energy. But when Tesla finally revealed the truth to J.P. Morgan, Morgan froze, then narrowed his eyes, then spoke the sentence that doomed the tower. "If anyone can draw power from the air, where do I put the meter?" In that moment, Tesla understood. Morgan had never wanted a revolution. He had wanted a monopoly, and Tesla could never give him that. The funding stopped. The payments dried up. Morgan withdrew. Wardenclyffe began to die. Tesla refused to surrender. He sold his patents. He borrowed money from friends. He mortgaged his future. He begged Westinghouse, investors, even governments. But no one would support a project with no profit. Free energy frightened the powerful. Wireless electricity seemed like madness. And Tesla, thin, exhausted, visibly trembling from insomnia, looked more like a prophet than an engineer. To investors, profits were liabilities. The newspapers mocked him. Cartoonists sketched him speaking to Martians. Former colleagues whispered that he had finally lost his mind. All while the great tower stood silent, unfinished, a wounded giant overlooking the Atlantic. In 1905, with debt suffocating him, Tesla was forced into bankruptcy. Suppliers seized equipment, banks circled, lawsuits mounted, and Wardenclyffe, still incomplete, became a monument to a dream the world did not yet understand. Visitors reported seeing Tesla wandering the site alone, walking around the tower as though comforting a dying friend. He touched the wooden beams. He stared at the dome. He whispered calculations to himself, refusing to accept defeat. He knew the tower would work. He knew the dream was sound. What he didn't know was how to save it. By 1917, with Tesla unable to pay taxes on the land, the U.S. government ordered the tower demolished. They feared it might be used by German spies during the war. An absurd notion, but one that sealed its fate. Explosives were placed at the base. A crowd gathered. With a thunderous crash, the tower collapsed, a titan falling to earth. The dream died with it. Tesla was not there to witness the destruction. He could not bear to. He sat alone in his hotel room, hands folded, eyes hollow. The sound of the explosion reached him only as a rumor, but he felt it like a blow to the chest. Wardenclyffe had been his child, his masterpiece, his offering to the world, and now it was gone. He whispered only one sentence that day. The world was not ready. In room 3327, decades later, Tesla closed his eyes. The memory still hurt. He had built Niagara. He had tamed lightning. He had touched the dream of global power. Yet Wardenclyffe had ended in silence. The tower that was meant to sing to the whole earth never produced even a single note. He breathed slowly, as though steadying a wound that still ached. Outside, lightning flashed, but he did not smile. Tonight, the light reminded him not of triumph, but of the song that never came. A song the world might still need. A song he would never hear. The memory of Wardenclyffe sat heavily in Tesla's mind, like a collapsed star, dense, impossible to escape. In the dim quiet of room 3327, he felt the weight of that dream pressing on his chest. A reminder not only of failure, but of the world's refusal to see what he saw. And when a dream dies, something inside a man changes. Tesla did not stop imagining. He did not stop inventing. But his visions grew stranger, sharper, darker, invisible forces. Vibrations only he could sense. Weapons to end all war. Radiant energy from the stars. Machines that could speak to planets. To the outside world, these ideas sounded like fantasies. But, to Tesla, they were as real as any generator he had ever built. And so began one of the most misunderstood chapters of his life. A chapter of fear, ambition, brilliance, and dissent. A chapter of the death ray. After Wardenclyffe's collapse, Tesla wandered the edges of science like a ghost, looking for ideas large enough to contain the grief he could not name. his mind, forever sleepless, moved deeper into the territory others avoided, the territory between physics and myth. He became obsessed with cosmic rays, a stream of invisible particles raining constantly from the galaxies above. Tesla believed these particles carried more energy than lightning, more power than any man-made generator. He spent nights staring through the window at the stars, whispering calculations to himself. "The universe," he said softly, "is full of electricity. It is ours to tap." People laughed, but they had laughed at AC. They had laughed at wireless power. They had laughed at Wardenclyffe, right up until it rose like a giant from the earth. Tesla was no stranger to the ridicule of small minds, yet even he knew that his new ideas were stranger than anything that had come before. In 1908, after years of quiet research, Tesla presented the world with a concept he called teleforce. But the newspapers chose a more dramatic name, a name that would follow him for the rest of his life: the death ray. The idea was this: a machine capable of releasing streams of highly charged particles, accelerated to such velocity and concentrated to such force that they could stop engines miles away, cut through steel like paper, or reduce entire aircraft to dust in midair. Not a bomb, not a missile, not an explosion, a beam, a silent, invisible beam of pure force. A weapon so powerful it could make war impossible. Tesla insisted that he did not want to create destruction. He wanted to create deterrence. If every nation built such a machine, he said, no nation would dare to attack another. War would vanish from the earth. To Tesla, it was not a weapon. It was peace. But peace built on fear is still fear. And governments do not trust fear unless they own it. The media erupted. Some called him a prophet. Others called him a madman. Some believed he was bluffing, desperate for investors. Others believed he had truly discovered a new form of energy. The United States War Department sent representatives to inquire about the device, but Tesla refused to hand over the details without proper compensation and control. Foreign governments reached out quietly: the Soviet Union, Great Britain, France, even Japan. Tesla responded in polite, carefully worded letters, but he trusted no one. "It must not fall into the wrong hands," he repeated often. The irony, of course, was that the world believed his hands were already the wrong hands. Tesla's obsession deepened. He spoke endlessly about lightning weapons, earthquake machines, global energy transmitters, and invisible shields that could cover entire borders. He claimed he could build a wall of force powerful enough to protect any nation from invasion. He claimed he could harness the Earth's resonant frequency to send messages across planets. He claimed he could detect events thousands of miles away through subtle vibrations of the planet. Each idea was rooted in real physics, but stretched beyond what the world could accept. Journalists caricatured him as a wizard with wild hair. Scientists dismissed him as brilliant but delusional. Former colleagues avoided him to protect their reputations. But the truth was simpler. Tesla was alone, and loneliness twists genius into something sharper, more desperate, more fragile. In 1915, the New York Times reported that Tesla and Edison were to share the Nobel Prize in Physics. The announcement spread quickly, but the prize never came. Some say Edison refused to share it. Others say Tesla refused to stand beside him. Still others say the committee backed away from the controversy. Tesla never spoke of it. But afterward, he withdrew even deeper into solitude. No more banquets, no more lectures, no more applause, only visions, only machines, only ideas that frightened even him. Tesla began to experience hallucinations, flashes of light that were not from electricity, whispers that came from nowhere, vibrations in the floor that no one else felt, colors shifting around objects. He believed he could feel storms forming hundreds of miles away. He believed he could hear insects walking on the floor. He believed he could sense thought waves from people around him. Perhaps these were symptoms of exhaustion, the result of decades without real sleep. Or perhaps, as Tesla believed, his senses were evolving, tuned to frequencies others could not perceive. Either explanation is lonely. By the 1930s, Tesla was old, thin, and forgotten by most of the world, but his mind remained ferociously alive, still generating ideas with the intensity of a lightning storm. He continued to write about his death ray, insisting it was real. He continued to send letters to governments, begging them to let him build a prototype. He continued to believe he could create a world without war. People mocked him. They called him eccentric. They called him senile. But in the quiet of his hotel room, Tesla whispered to himself, "I have seen the future. They have not." In truth, Tesla's death ray was never built. Whether it could have worked, no one can say. Some modern physicists believe it was theoretically possible. Others argue it violated the laws of physics. Some think Tesla was onto something ahead of his time, a precursor to modern particle beam weapons. But the device disappeared with him. Any notes he kept were either lost, destroyed, or seized after his death. It remains one of history's most tantalizing mysteries, a vision too powerful to exist, a dream too dangerous to share, a hope too large for a world that feared everything it could not measure. As Tesla sat alone in room 3327, he thought not of war, but of peace. He had never wanted death. He wanted a world where energy flowed freely, where nations did not kill each other over coal or oil, where weapons became irrelevant. He whispered into the empty room, "I never wanted to build destruction, only protection." Lightning flashed outside, illuminating his tired face. And for the first time, Tesla felt truly old, not because of age, but because of disappointment. The world wanted weapons. He wanted harmony. The world wanted control. He wanted liberation. The world wanted fear. He wanted light. And now, as the storm rumbled across the city, Tesla realized something painful. He could imagine the future perfectly, but he could not force the world to follow him into it. The nights grew longer in room 3327, and Tesla felt them pressing around him like a cold fog. He had once commanded waterfalls, lightning, and towers that touched the sky. He had once stood in laboratories glowing with violet fire, surrounded by journalists, investors, students, admirers, people who believed he carried electricity in his veins. But now, the world had moved on, and Tesla, the man who once illuminated cities, was fading quietly into shadow. The fall did not come suddenly. It came the way winter arrives, slowly, silently, with small losses accumulating like snow. A forgotten letter, an unpaid bill, a canceled project, a mocking newspaper column, a fading memory in the public mind. Genius rarely ends in glory. More often, it ends in solitude. And Tesla, more than any other, was destined for solitude. After the collapse of Wardenclyffe, Tesla's financial situation deteriorated with frightening speed. Debts piled up, patrons withdrew, opportunities vanished like smoke in the wind. He tried to start new companies. Wireless lighting, turbine engines, oscillators, remote-controlled machines. But investors, once dazzled by the promise of AC, now feared his visions were too bold, too strange, too abstract. They wanted machines that could be patented, sold, monetized, not ideas waiting for a more imaginative century. Tesla spoke of tapping cosmic rays, harnessing the Earth's resonance, creating global communication networks, powering cities without wires, building flying machines without wings. The world wasn't ready. Or perhaps the world had grown tired. One businessman famously told him, "Your ideas are magnificent, Mr. Tesla, but the world is not in the market for miracles." Even George Westinghouse, who had once trusted him completely, could no longer rescue him. Westinghouse's own empire was failing, and the weight of the War of Currents had nearly crushed him. Tesla, without income, without patents generating revenue, and without a company of his own, began slipping into poverty. By 1916, the situation was humiliating. He was sued repeatedly for unpaid rent. Creditors stalked him across the city. His lab equipment was auctioned off piece by piece. Reporters wrote cruel headlines like "Tesla's genius fading" and "The wizard who lost his magic." He lost his elegant laboratory, then his workshop, then the last of his assistants. He moved into smaller and smaller hotel rooms. First the Waldorf Astoria, then the St. Regis, then the Governor Clinton, then finally the New York Hotel, room to room, each one cheaper than the last. He paid each bill by pawning belongings: instruments, books, inventions, even the suits he once wore to banquets. And yet, even in poverty, Tesla remained dignified. He walked with straight posture, carried gloves and a cane, dressed impeccably no matter how empty his pockets were. Pride was the last thing he refused to surrender, but poverty was not the only wound. Tesla began to withdraw from the world. Crowds overwhelmed him. Voices exhausted him. Conversations drained his fragile energy. He had always lived inside his mind. Now he retreated there completely. Years of insomnia carved deep shadows beneath his eyes. His cheekbones sharpened. His fingers shook slightly when he held a pen. His suit hung loose on his thin frame. He spent hours feeding pigeons in Bryant Park. It soothed him. He said the birds were gentle, honest, incapable of betrayal. One pigeon, the one with white feathers and soft gray eyes, became special to him. He spoke to her. She followed him. He bought expensive seeds he could not afford just to feed her. He later said, "I loved that pigeon as a man loves a woman. As long as I had her, there was a purpose to my life." Some mocked him, others pitied him. But to Tesla, the pigeon was the last being on Earth that understood his loneliness. The scientific community, once awestruck by him, had turned skeptical. Newer inventors, Marconi, Fleming, DeForest, were celebrated as pioneers of radio and telecommunications. Yet, Tesla believed, with bitterness, that many of their breakthroughs came from his uncredited ideas. He once muttered, "They are stealing my work. They do not know where the ideas come from." He wasn't entirely wrong. Marconi's early radio used 17 of Tesla's patented inventions. Yet, Marconi won the Nobel Prize. Tesla did not. When asked about Marconi, Tesla replied coldly, "Let him continue. He is using 17 of my patents." Bitterness had replaced wonder. Frustration replaced inspiration. And his sleepless mind, once a powerful engine, now became a labyrinth from which he could not escape. By the 1920s, Tesla's eccentricities grew sharper. He refused to touch dirt, dust, hair, or pearls. He demanded 18 napkins at dinner. Always 18. He insisted every action be divisible by 3. He walked exactly 16 miles every day. He checked the angles of his silverware before each meal. He refused to shake hands. He washed compulsively. He claimed he could communicate with pigeons through vibrations. To the world, these were signs of madness. To Tesla, they were rituals of survival. Discipline was the only barrier between his mind and the abyss. Yet despite his decline, despite the ridicule, he still produced ideas. Ideas so advanced that they now resemble early concepts of radar, drones, particle beams, renewable energy, global communications, even smartphones. In a sense, he did not decline intellectually. He simply outran his century. But the world moved on without him. The same newspapers that once hailed him as a prophet now treated him as an aging curiosity, a relic of a past era, brilliant but broken. He still gave interviews, still made predictions, still spoke with the intensity of a man convinced he would one day return to greatness. But the spark in his voice grew softer. The electricity in his eyes dimmed. The rare friends who visited him noticed the change. He was lonely, desperately lonely, a man surrounded by ideas, but not by people, because genius isolates, and Tesla's genius isolated him completely. One of the saddest moments came in 1928. He received his final patent, a design for a vertical takeoff aircraft, an early concept of what would one day become the helicopter or drone. But no one cared. No one funded it. No one built it. It was a final whisper from a voice the world no longer listened to. Tesla folded the patent gently, placed it in his drawer, and sat quietly for a long time. The man who once illuminated cities now sat in silence, in a hotel room paid for by the kindness of others. And yet, through it all, he never hated the world. He never grew cruel. He never sought revenge. He never cursed his fate. Instead, he whispered, "The future will show what I have done." Tesla believed he would be remembered, not now, but someday. That humanity, after outgrowing its fears, its greed, its limitations, would rediscover his ideas and realize how far ahead he had truly been. He was right, but he would not live to see it. In room 3327, Tesla felt the memory tightening in his chest. Not the poverty, not the failures, not the ridicule, but the distance, the growing distance between himself and a world that had once called him genius. He whispered to the empty room, "I have given everything, perhaps too much." And the storm outside responded with silence, as though even the lightning knew his fall was not a failure, but a tragedy born from a world unable to see through the eyes of a sleepless mind. Night had fallen over New York, cold and pale, wrapping the city in a silence that felt heavier than usual. Snow drifted down between the tall buildings, powdering the rooftops and softening the noise of traffic far below. Room 3327 of the New Yorker Hotel sat dimly lit, a small island of fading light in a sea of winter darkness. Inside, Nikola Tesla sat alone in his chair by the window. His room was simple, almost heartbreakingly so. A narrow bed, a wooden desk, a small lamp with a tired yellow glow. A stack of papers, mostly unpaid bills, rested untouched. His suit lay neatly folded. A few books, most of them gifts from people who had long stopped visiting, sat on the shelf. The air was still. Tesla, now in his 86th year, looked out at the city he had helped electrify. From his window, he could see the Empire State Building rising like a titan of steel, glowing with lights powered by the very alternating current he had fought for. He watched the lights flicker gently in the night, the lights that would not exist without him, though few remembered that fact anymore. His thin hands rested calmly on his knees. His breath was slow, his skin pale and delicate as parchment, but his eyes, still sharp, still shimmering with quiet electricity, watched the city as if it were an old friend, or a farewell. Tesla's life had been a series of nights. Nights of storms, nights of visions, nights of invention, nights when sleep felt like an impossible luxury. But tonight was different. Tonight there were no machines humming in the corner, no sudden flashes of inspiration, no equations burning behind his eyelids. Tonight was quiet, too quiet. He felt the weight of it. For the first time in decades, Tesla allowed himself to truly feel the exhaustion in his bones. The exhaustion of a lifetime spent chasing lightning, bending currents, dreaming futures into being. His body, once sharp and purposeful, now felt fragile. His hands no longer held tools steady. His steps no longer carried him with a sense of mission. Even his mind, his restless, brilliant, sleepless mind, had begun to drift quietly into the soft fog of age. He felt it slipping, not painfully, not suddenly, just gently. like a machine winding down after a long, magnificent performance. He closed his eyes and let his thoughts wander, not to equations, not to experiments, but to the fragments of life he had long ignored. He thought of his mother, Juka, her hands weaving wool, her voice soft and patient, as she soothed him from the terrifying flashes of light that haunted his childhood. He thought of Danilo, his lost brother, whose death had carved a wound so deep it had shaped everything that followed. He thought of his father, stern and proud, urging him toward the priesthood. And of the moment, Nikola chose a different path, a path of sparks and storms. He thought of the nights in his first American laboratory, surrounded by coils and transformers, laughing softly to himself as electricity danced around him like angels made of fire. He thought of the first time he saw the Niagara generator turn, the roar of the water, the hum of the turbine, the miracle of light bursting from wires that stretched into the world like veins. He thought of the people he'd known. Westinghouse, kind and generous. Edison, brilliant and stubborn. Mark Twain, always laughing. The investors who believed in him, the ones who betrayed him, the ones who forgot him. He thought of the pigeon with the white feathers, the one creature that had loved him without expectation or doubt. He whispered into the stillness, "I hope you are waiting for me." Tesla's eyes opened again, slowly. The room felt colder now. He stood from his chair, one last effort of will, and approached the desk. His steps were small, fragile but deliberate. On the desk lay a few sheets of paper, notes, memories, unfinished ideas no one would ever read. He touched them gently. Then, reaching into his pocket, he removed a worn envelope. Inside it was a photograph of his beloved pigeon. The edges were frayed, the image faded, but it was one of the few things he kept close to him until the very end. He placed it on the desk with care. Next to it, he placed a single handwritten note. "Let the future tell the truth." He looked at the words for a long moment, as if ensuring they were positioned perfectly straight, then nodded once, satisfied. Tesla turned off the lamp. The room fell into darkness, illuminated only by the faint silver glow of the winter moon filtering through the window. Dust floated gently in the cold air like drifting stars. He walked back to his chair and sat down again, folding his hands in his lap, settling into the quiet. The weight of the night felt soft around him, comforting, like falling into the memory of a place he had once known. When he closed his eyes, he felt no fear. He felt release. And for the first time in his life, the storm inside his mind grew silent. No flashes of light, no equations, no machines spinning endlessly behind his eyelids. Just peace. A long, deep, uninterrupted peace. Tesla exhaled, a slow breath that seemed to carry a lifetime with it. A breath of surrender, of acceptance, of completion. Outside, the city lights flickered softly, as if bowing their heads, as if recognizing the moment, as if honoring the man who had given them life. And then, in the stillness of room 3327, in the quiet hour of early morning, Nikola Tesla simply stopped. No drama, no pain, no final words spoken aloud, only a mind, a brilliant, sleepless, incandescent mind, finally allowed to rest. The next day, a maid entered the room to deliver his breakfast. She knocked. No answer. She opened the door quietly and found Tesla sitting peacefully in his chair, head tilted slightly, hands folded, as though he had simply fallen asleep. But the room was too cold, too still, too silent. He had left the world the way he had lived, with dignity, with solitude, with a mind still full of stars. News of his death spread slowly. There were no crowds in the streets, no great public mourning, no grand ceremonies. A small obituary mentioned him as an inventor and nothing more. But the world did not yet understand. How could it? How can anyone understand a man who lived in lightning until the lightning inside him finally went dark? Tonight, New York glowed with the hum of alternating current, electricity flowing through wires that would never have existed without the dreams born in this very room. But Tesla, the man who dreamed of energy for all humanity, who fought storms of nature and storms of greed, who lived through triumph and heartbreak, who never stopped imagining the impossible, was gone. The genius who could not sleep had finally found his last night. Outside room 3327, life continued with the indifference of a vast city. New York roared on, cars rushing through frozen streets, neon signs flickering in the night, pedestrians hurrying past one another without looking up. Millions of lights burned across the skyline, each powered by systems that had sprung from the mind of a man who died in silence. But inside the quiet, shadowed room where Tesla had spent his final years, a different story lingered. Not just the story of a man, but the story of a mind that never rested. A mind that saw too much. A mind that illuminated a century while slowly dimming itself. A mind that could not sleep. Tesla's sleeplessness had always been treated as a curiosity, a quirk of genius, a strange endowment given only to those who were born different. But in the stillness after his death, one truth became impossible to ignore. His insomnia was not simply a habit. It was the shaping force of his life. A blessing and a curse, intertwined with every discovery, every failure, every dream he ever touched. It was both the engine of his brilliance and the shadow that devoured him. The world knew only the myth, Tesla the wizard, Tesla the genius, Tesla the magician of lightning. But beneath the myth was a human being, fragile, haunted, consumed by a mind that refused him any rest. From childhood, Tesla had known the terror of a mind too active for sleep. The flashes, those violent eruptions of light behind his eyes, came without warning. For other children, darkness was a place of safety. For Tesla, darkness was where the storms inside him mounted their fiercest attacks. He learned to fear the very act of closing his eyes. Later, as an adult, he spoke of sleep with a strange mixture of bitterness and admiration, as though it were a luxury afforded to others but denied to him. He said once, almost wistfully, "Sleep is a small slice of death, and I have never learned to die." Others thought he was joking. He wasn't. For Tesla, sleep meant surrender. And surrender was something he had never mastered. At first, his insomnia felt like an ally. While other engineers rested, Tesla worked through the night. While others spent months testing a design, Tesla built and solved it inside his head before dawn. While others lost momentum, he pushed forward as though fueled by an endless stream of energy. The sleepless mind became his greatest advantage. It made him unstoppable. It made him extraordinary. It made him feared. But over time, the sleeplessness stopped feeling like an ally. It became something darker. A whisper in the back of his thoughts, a tremor in his fingers, a narrowing of the world into equations and visions he could not turn off. The engine that once carried him forward at impossible speeds now ran too hot. It burned him. There is a moment in every sleepless life where night and day lose their boundaries, where time becomes fluid, where a man no longer lives in the world around him, but in the one behind his eyes. Tesla crossed that threshold early. He existed in perpetual wakefulness, a waking dreamscape where ideas appeared fully formed, where visions erupted like storms, where the boundary between imagination and reality thinned dangerously. To him, the world felt distant, too slow, too dim, too limited. The only place he felt truly alive was inside the lightning of his thoughts. But the price of living too long in that place is that one begins to forget how to return. Tesla's insomnia separated him from others, then from sleep, then from rest, then from love, finally from the world itself. In his later years, Tesla's mind grew stranger, not weaker, but stranger. He claimed to hear vibrations the rest of the world could not sense. He believed he knew when storms were forming miles away. He said he could feel the movements of small insects. He spoke of signals from distant planets. He saw light where others saw darkness. Some dismissed him as delusional. Others pitied him. But neither dismissal nor pity captures the truth. His mind, deprived of rest for a lifetime, had begun to fray, not from madness, but from exhaustion. Imagine a violin string tuned too tightly. It produces a beautiful sound, right up until it snaps. Tesla never snapped, but he came close. His genius remained intact, even in old age. It simply no longer had the strength to hold back the storms inside him. Yet even in decline, Tesla carried a quiet understanding of his own suffering. He once said, "My brain is a receiver. In it, we pick up signals from the universe." To him, the sleepless mind was not an illness. It was a radio tuned to frequencies others could not hear. He suffered, yes, but he suffered in the service of something greater, a lifelong devotion to discovery, to understanding, to the hidden currents of the world. Most people sleep to recover from the day. Tesla lived in such a way that every day required more from him than sleep could ever repair. And yet, he endured. After his death, doctors performed a quiet investigation. They found no evidence of a peaceful decline, no stroke, no heart attack, no sudden trauma. What they found was a body simply worn out, a heart that had carried too much, a brain that had burned too brightly for too long, a man who had lived more hours awake than most, living 2 lifetimes. If genius were a flame, Tesla's had been a wildfire. Beautiful, dazzling, consuming. He did not die from disease. He died from being Nikola Tesla. In truth, Tesla's legacy is not just electricity, or motors, or wireless visions. It is a question. What happens to a man whose mind never rests? Does he conquer the world? Or does the world forget him? Does he illuminate the future? Or does he vanish into the shadows between brilliance and madness? Tesla did all these things. He conquered. He illuminated. He vanished. Because the sleepless mind can change humanity, but it cannot save the man who carries it. And so, when we look at the lights of a modern city, we are seeing more than electricity. We are seeing a monument to a mind denied sleep. To storms of thought no rest could calm, to a man who lived inside the brilliance that burned him. We are seeing the cost of genius. Back in room 3327, the night after his passing, the air felt heavy, not with tragedy, but with the afterglow of a life that had vibrated at impossible frequencies. The city outside glittered like constellations scattered across the dark. Tesla's lights. Tesla's current. Tesla's legacy. The man was gone, but the sleeplessness that had driven him now illuminated millions of homes. He had finally found rest, but the world he electrified would remain awake forever. The world did not pause when Nikola Tesla died. No great monuments were built, no grand ceremonies were held, no politicians gave speeches, no nations flew their flags at half-mast. His passing slipped quietly into the morning news. A few short lines printed beneath the weather report. An inventor has died, they said. Nothing more. But history has a strange way of rewriting itself. Time, like electricity, finds its own path. And slowly, the world began to realize the truth. Tesla had not died in that quiet hotel room. His body had, his life had. But his influence, his visions, his inventions, his ideas born from sleepless nights, had only just begun. His legacy did not rise in the days after his death. It rose in the decades that followed, as humanity stepped into the future he had already seen. A future lit by currents he had predicted, connected by signals he had whispered about, powered by machines he had described long before anyone believed him. Tesla had lived ahead of his time. Now, time was finally catching up. Today, when a switch is flipped and a city lights up, it is Tesla's voice humming through the wires. When a motor spins in a factory, it is his mathematics driving its pulse. When a plane flies with alternating current systems, when a smartphone uses wireless transfer, when global communication travels invisibly across continents, it is his dream echoing beneath the surface. Every fluorescent lamp, every induction motor, every radio signal, every neon sign, every modern power grid, every wireless transmission, every spark of electricity that moves at a distance. All of it whispers the same truth. Tesla was here. But Tesla's legacy is not just technological. It is philosophical, emotional, human. He represented something the world rarely sees. A mind driven not by wealth, not by ambition, not by fame, but by vision. A pure, relentless, unyielding pursuit of possibility. Even his failures, perhaps especially his failures, are testaments to the nature of genius. Wardenclyffe, the death ray, the cosmic energy transmitter, the global wireless grid, the earthquake machine. These were not the delusions of an aging man. They were chapters in a story the world wasn't ready to read. Not yet. The irony is profound. Many of the ideas dismissed as madness in Tesla's time are being explored today. Wireless energy transfer, planetary resonance, ion propulsion, beam-based defense systems, renewable global power networks, quantum communication, energy harvesting from cosmic radiation. Tesla's impossible now lives in laboratories across the world. What was once called madness is now called innovation. And so, Tesla's legacy grew. Not through monuments, not through ceremonies, but through realization. As engineers rediscovered his patents, as historians unearthed forgotten writings, as scientists re-examined the possibilities he spoke of, a new narrative began to form. Tesla was not a failure. Tesla was not a tragic eccentric. Tesla was not a man who lost his way. He was a man who walked a path the rest of us would not follow until nearly a century later. He was an explorer of invisible worlds: electricity, magnetism, resonance, vibration, frequency, landscapes no eye could see yet, which shaped everything around us. He was a cartographer of the unseen, but his legacy is not only about the future he predicted, it is also about the cost of walking ahead of the world. Tesla's story is a reminder that genius is rarely comfortable, rarely appreciated, rarely rewarded. Brilliance isolates. Vision frightens. Originality threatens those who build empires on old ideas. Tesla lived this truth more than anyone. He gave the world a waterfall of light, but the world repaid him with an empty room in a forgotten hotel. He offered energy without wires, and they called him a dreamer. He offered inventions decades ahead of their time, and they called him unstable. He offered himself completely, relentlessly, sleeplessly, and they left him alone. And yet, he kept giving, and giving, and giving. Because his purpose was never glory, it was illumination. What then is Tesla's legacy? It is every spark of human curiosity, every refusal to accept limits, every dream that feels too big, too strange, too impossible. It is a message whispered across time. Do not fear imagination. The future belongs to those who dream beyond the horizon. Tesla's legacy is an invitation, a challenge to look deeper, to think differently, to dare to imagine a world that does not yet exist. He reminds us that the greatest revolutions come not from conformity, but from the minds that cannot sleep. In the years after his death, monuments slowly rose, first in Belgrade, then in Niagara, then in New York. His childhood home became a museum. His name appeared in textbooks. His inventions were rediscovered and honored. His face began appearing on murals, stamps, statues. And then something remarkable happened. A new generation, born into a world of wireless technology and global electricity, looked back and realized he had built it all. Much of the 20th and 21st centuries rest on a foundation Tesla poured with his bare hands. Today, the name Tesla circles the globe. On cars, on technologies, on ideas. Not as a corporate brand, but as a symbol of brilliance, of possibility, of defiance against the impossible. A symbol of a man who created the modern world and died before the world understood. Back in room 3327, the place where he breathed his last, the air still feels charged, as if something of him remained suspended in the space he once inhabited. Perhaps the mind that never slept still lingers in the currents of the world he electrified. Perhaps every flicker of a light bulb, every vibration of a transformer, every whisper of wireless signal is a quiet echo of Tesla's eternal dream. And perhaps, in some sense, he never truly died. Because the story of Nikola Tesla does not end with his body. It ends with his legacy. A legacy still unfolding, still expanding, still illuminating. A legacy written not in marble, but in current. Not in words, but in frequency. A legacy that reminds us that even a single sleepless mind can light the entire world. Night descended over New York like a velvet curtain, soft and heavy. Snow dusted the rooftops. The city glowed, bridges, towers, windows, avenues, everywhere. Light. White light. Warm light. Steady light. Electricity running through steel arteries beneath the streets, humming through transformers, sparking through circuits that no longer belonged to Edison or Westinghouse or any corporation. It belonged to history now, to progress, to humanity. But in a silent upper floor room of the New Yorker hotel, a different kind of light lingered, one that was not powered by generators or grids. The faint invisible light of a story, the afterglow of a mind, the echo of Nikola Tesla. Tesla had lived his last years in this room, walking its narrow length, drawing invisible diagrams in the air, whispering to pigeons outside the window, dreaming of technologies the world still had no name for. But though his body was gone, the room felt as if he had only just stepped out for a moment. A presence remained, woven into the fading wallpaper, the chipped desk, the dim lamp beside the bed. The man was gone. The energy remained. And it is here, in the emptiness of his final room, that the truth of his life becomes clearest. Tesla was not simply an inventor. He was not simply a scientist. He was not simply a visionary. He was light. A particular kind of light. The kind that appears in storms and stars, in sparks and dreams, in ideas that refuse to die. A light that does not ask permission to exist. A light that continues to glow long after its source burns out. To understand Tesla's story is to understand the strange duality of brilliance, that a mind can change the world and still be unrecognized by it, that a man can illuminate entire nations and still die alone in the dark, that a genius can see the future clearly and still be ignored by the present. But this is also the truth. Light does not need acknowledgement to shine. Electricity does not require applause to flow. Tesla's impact was never measured in awards or wealth. It was measured in the quiet hum of cities, in the glow of lamps, in the invisible currents running through every home on Earth. Long after his last breath, his work was still living, still moving, still vibrating across continents, still illuminating the world he once walked through as a stranger. Today, 1,000 technologies carry his fingerprints. The power grid that fuels modern civilization, the induction motors in factories and homes, The neon signs that paint nighttime streets in color, the radio waves that carry voices across oceans, the wireless signals transmitting across continents, the charging coils in modern devices, the dream of sustainable global energy. Even the search for life beyond Earth, a search Tesla believed in early, still echoes with his theories about planetary communication. His hand is everywhere, though his name is not always written there. But light does not need a signature. After Tesla's death, the FBI seized his papers, terrified of what secrets might lie within. They expected blueprints for weapons, dangerous devices, formulas too powerful to release. What they found were the fragments of a dream. Notes about free energy, sketches of flying machines, calculations about resonance, ideas for harvesting cosmic radiation, not weapons. Possibilities. A mind still searching, still reaching, still glowing, even in old age. The light had not dimmed, only the world around it had. There is a story often told about Tesla, though historians debate its accuracy. It says that, near the end of his life, Tesla stood at the window of room 3327 during a storm. Lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating his face in pale flashes. A young bellboy passing by in the hallway heard Tesla whisper, "They are calling me home." Whether the story is true or not, it feels true, because Tesla's life had always been intertwined with storms. He had been born during one. He had shaped them in his laboratory. He had chased lightning across theories and experiments. He had named electricity as his only true companion. And in the end, perhaps lightning came to guide him back to the place where all energy returns. The great circuit, the universal current, the resonant field that binds everything, the light. When a man like Nikola Tesla dies, his life does not collapse into silence. It disperses. It diffuses. It spreads into the world the way electricity spreads through a circuit. His body remained in a small funeral home for a week. Few attended the ceremony. A single violin played. The city moved on, but the future did not. In the decades that followed, Tesla's name began to rise. Slowly at first, then all at once. Scientists rediscovered his papers. Historians rewrote textbooks. Engineers realized how many modern inventions bore his design. Students spoke his name with admiration. The public began to see not the eccentric old man, but the visionary who had shaped the world before it was ready to understand him. A man who had walked too far ahead of his time and paid the price for it. But time, eventually, caught up. Today, Tesla stands as one of the most influential figures in the history of science and engineering. A mind whose ideas continue to ripple through every technology we touch. But his greatest legacy is not a machine, not a theory, not even a dream. It is a reminder of what a single human mind can do when it is unwilling to sleep. A reminder that brilliance often comes hand in hand with sacrifice. A reminder that the world may reject those who carry light, but cannot dim the light itself. And a reminder that there are forces in this universe that only the dreamers can see. In the final image of this story, the camera drifts away from room 3327, out through the window into the glowing city below. Lights. Thousands of lights. Millions of lights. All burning against the dark. The narrator's voice lowers to a whisper. He gave the world more than electricity. He gave us the courage to imagine. The camera rises higher, above the skyline, above the towers, above the streets, above the grid of alternating current pulsing beneath the earth. The city becomes a constellation, a galaxy of light in the blackness, a galaxy Tesla helped bring to life. And in that vast sweep of brightness, there is a truth that hums softly beneath everything. Nikola Tesla has not vanished. His light never died. It lives in every spark the world will ever make. Fade to black. a final whisper. The mind that could not sleep woke the world.